Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. I'm going to talk a little bit today about meetings, going to meetings, why they're an important part of support in the early recovery process, and why some people adapt them as something that they do for their entire lives as part of their recovery. So, looking at one of the websites, and I'll post the link in the comments. But looking at a few websites, and one of them lists some reasons why meetings can be very important, especially in early recovery. One is to provide social support. In our addiction, most of us tend to isolate in some way, shape, or form. And if we're not careful, we will do the same thing in our recovery. Isolation in recovery is typically not a good thing and is one of the things that can lead to going back to using and drinking again. And so going to meetings provides a social structure, social support structure that is built into your schedule, built into your day, that prevents that level of isolation from creeping back into your lifestyle. In the same token, there is also accountability built in there. So when you start to socialize with other people in recovery, when you start to form a tribe of people who you come to be friends with, who you come to form community fellowship with, then you get built-in accountability. And that's really important for people in early recovery. You know, sometimes being accountable to ourselves isn't enough. Sometimes having other people to be accountable for really helps provide some of the momentum that we need to push through some of the more difficult parts of recovery, especially early recovery. Um, Meetings are also a good way to spend time. You know, when you first quit drinking and smoking, drinking and using drugs, you're going to have a lot of time on your hands. And so, because it's often amazing how much time you invested in those activities. And so now with that time back in your hands, it's often becomes difficult to figure out how to use that time. That can lead to boredom. Boredom is one of the things that often leads people back to using or drinking. So having meetings in your life where you're going to regularly see a group of people, be with a group of people, and you're making time in the day for that, that helps to use up some of this time that you now have available, and it's using it in a healthy way. And so it finally, that gets to the last point that I'll make here, that meetings provide some structure to life, especially in the beginning of recovery. I found that the life was very chaotic. You know, it took me work to put together, you know, minutes and hours of time because life just felt so chaotic, and it felt like I was constantly having to work to keep myself together. It was a very difficult time in a lot of ways. It was also a very rewarding time. But part of the reason that I was able to enjoy the rewarding aspect of it was because I was in so many meetings and outpatient programs and all of the things that I was just doing. My life was really wrapped around recovery for that first 90 days. And so it became very important for me to have that structure because that allowed me to have a place where I could explore answers to questions that were coming up, to have fellowship with other people who were going through the same things, and to know that I wasn't alone in the problems that I was facing. So a lot of people do find that AA meetings or NA meetings, for example, aren't necessarily their thing. And that's understandable because, each meeting that you go to, what you'll learn is each meeting and group you go to has its own personality. And I live in a city, San Antonio, Texas, where there are just dozens and dozens of AA meetings every day. Pretty much from 6 in the morning till 1 in the morning, I could find a meeting to go to, and they'd all be different. And that's one of the great things about living in a city with such a strong recovery community. But if you find a meeting that doesn't quite fit what you're looking for, it can turn you off to meetings in general. So my advice to anybody who is in early recovery trying to find a meeting is, first off, don't, if you're looking at AA or NA meetings and you go to one and it's not really fitting your style. For example, if you go to a meeting and people are talking a lot about God and you're not into the God aspect of things as much, you really want to focus more on some of the more secular aspects of the program. Don't give up, because there are lots of other meetings where where the conversation doesn't necessarily go that direction. And so keep trying until you find a meeting that fits. But if you don't find that AA or NA meetings are your cup of tea, if they don't make sense to you, try something else. Now, I'll put this on the website as well. I put this in the comments as well. But there's SMART recovery meetings, which SMART is a 4-point program that looks at tools that can help with obtaining and maintaining motivation, managing urges, handling emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, finding balance in life. There's Women for Sobriety, which is a support group strictly for women. There's secular addiction recovery support called SOS. There's even moderation management, which is a different type of recovery group that allows some members to consider just moderating alcohol use rather than being completely abstinent from it. There's all sorts of support groups out there for any for any flavor of support and fellowship that you're looking for. But it's really important to explore that, because the last thing that I want to look at is just the importance of peer support in general. So reading from a website that is quoting a report by the University of North Carolina's Gillings School of Global Public Health. It says peer support links people living with a chronic condition such as diabetes. People with a common illness are able to share knowledge and experience, including some that many health workers do not have. Peer support is frequent, ongoing, accessible, and flexible. Peer support can take many forms: phone calls, text messaging, group meetings, home visits, going for walks together, and even grocery shopping. It complements and enhances other healthcare services by creating the emotional, social, and practical assistance necessary for managing the disease and staying healthy. So peer support is really what we're talking about here. Meetings are a popular method of peer support because they are so widely available, and it's something that is easily accessible to everybody involved. But these days, there's all sorts of other methods of peer support. You can have a group text with people who are in recovery, who are suffering from the same kind of issues that you might be dealing with. You can get online support groups where there aren't really meetings, but people are posting in forums. You can even get phone buddies. There are certain online groups. Recovery Elevator is one of those groups that will link you up with an accountability partner, where you can talk to each other and help each other from miles and miles away. And so the ways that you can gain this peer support are endless. But meetings are the longest form of this kind of support in an organized fashion. And I have found that going to an AA meeting can often be, not always, but can often be a spiritual experience. More than likely, if I keep my ears open, if I really listen, I hear something I needed to hear that day. More than likely, if I go to an AA meeting ready to help someone, I will find someone who needs some help. And that's the wonderful thing about these meetings. That's what I love about these meetings. So they're an important part of my recovery. They're an important part of a lot of people's recovery. But one size does not fit all. And you have to find what works for you. The meeting that might work for the person next to you might not work for you. If AA works for person A, Smart Recovery might work for person B, and something more church oriented may work for person C. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What is clear is that we can't do this alone. You can't beat addiction by yourself. You can't do it alone. You need to have support from people around you. And that's why meetings, organized groups, something similar has been so important in my recovery and in the recovery of the people that I look up to in this community who have had some long-term sobriety time. That's it for today. I'll be back here tomorrow with more. In the meantime, have a good one.